The icy wind cut through my gloves as I clutched my phone tighter, reading the text message for the third time. My mother's words burned into my eyes like they'd been carved there permanently. Madison, don't come for Christmas. We don't have space. Please don't embarrass us. The blood rushed to my fingertips, making them tingle, just like the first time she'd ever told me I was a disappointment. 26 years old, and still, one text from my mom could reduce me to the insecure girl who had once begged for her approval. It wasn't just the message. It was what it meant. There was room for everyone else. My brother Ryan, my sister Chloe, their partners, even some distant cousins who always managed to make the guest list. But not me. Never me. I stood on the snowy sidewalk outside my apartment, Christmas lights twinkling mockingly from every balcony and window. Couples walked by hand in hand, arms wrapped tight, faces lit with warmth that I hadn't felt in years. And me? I was the forgotten daughter, the one they said wasn't successful enough to sit at the perfect Christmas table. Funny thing is, if they only knew the truth, the table they guarded so fiercely was nothing compared to the empire I owned. The restaurants where they loved to dine on holidays, the hotels they bragged about staying in, those were mine. Every chandelier, every marble floor, every executive suite, it all had my name written on the deeds. But in my parents' eyes, I was still just a dropout, a failure, the one who didn't make it. The memory of my father's voice from 3 years ago still echoed, sharp and cruel. No daughter of mine will waste her life chasing silly ideas. If you walk away from law school, don't bother coming back home. And I hadn't. Not once. I shoved my phone into my pocket and pulled my scarf higher around my face. Snow crunched beneath my boots as I walked aimlessly, the words replaying in my head like a broken record. No room. Don't embarrass us. Embarrass them? I wanted to laugh, but it came out as a choked sound that turned to fog in the frozen air. Just yesterday, I had signed off on a deal expanding my hospitality group into Miami, a project worth nearly $80 million. While my family decorated their tree without me, I was quietly running one of the fastest-growing luxury hotel chains in the country. But to them, I was still the girl who couldn't measure up to Ryan, the golden boy attorney, or Chloe, the picture-perfect corporate consultant. They posted their lives on Instagram like trophies. Meanwhile, I stayed silent, letting them believe whatever stories they wanted about me. Maybe part of me wanted this. Wanted them to see me as small, invisible, forgettable, because then, when the truth came out, it would cut deeper than any insult they'd ever thrown. I stopped in front of a cafe window, the glow inside spilling onto the snow. Families gathered around tables, laughing, passing mugs of cocoa, tearing into gift-wrapped boxes. My chest ached with something I couldn't name. Loss, anger, maybe both. Christmas was supposed to mean warmth, forgiveness, belonging. For me, it had always meant the opposite. Judgment, comparison, silence. I remembered being 17, sneaking into the kitchen on Christmas Eve just to steal a cookie, only to overhear my mother whispering to my aunt, "Madison will never amount to anything. She doesn't have Ryan's brains or Chloe's drive. She'll always be the one we have to worry about." She was wrong. God, she was so wrong. But what hurt most was that even now, with everything I had achieved, part of me still craved their approval. Part of me still wanted a chair at that table, a stocking on their mantel, my name written on a tag beneath their tree. I pulled away from the window, blinking hard against the sting in my eyes. No, not tonight. Not again. If they thought I was going to beg, they were mistaken. If they thought I was going to show up on their doorstep like some stray dog in the snow, they didn't know me at all. I whispered the words to myself, a vow against the freezing wind. I won't beg for a seat at a table I could buy 1,000 times over. Because the truth was, they needed me more than I'd ever need them. They just didn't know it yet. And when the time came, when fate forced them to walk through the golden doors of the very empire they mocked me for chasing, they'd see me for who I truly was. Not the failure, not the embarrassment, but Madison Carter, CEO, owner, the woman they cast aside, standing taller than they ever imagined. For now, though. I walked alone through the snow, my breath clouding in the night air, my mother's words burning deeper with each step. No room at Christmas. Fine. Let them keep their table. They had no idea the feast would one day be served under my roof. The snow had picked up by the time I made it back to my apartment. Thick, white flakes swirled under the yellow glow of the street lamps, spinning in every direction before melting against the pavement. My boots left a trail of half-formed prints on the icy sidewalk, the storm slowly swallowing them behind me. It was the perfect metaphor for my life. No matter how much I tried to make an impression, my family was always ready to cover it up, erase me, act as if I had never been there at all. Inside, the silence of my apartment pressed against me like a second skin. I dropped my coat across the chair, let my scarf slide to the floor, and collapsed on the couch. My phone buzzed in my pocket again, but I didn't need to check it to know who it was. My mother never texted more than once unless it was to drive her point home. She probably wanted to remind me that it would look bad if I tried to show up. Embarrass us, I muttered bitterly under my breath, staring at the ceiling. The words echoed in the quiet apartment, bouncing back at me, sharper than before. I rolled onto my side, clutching a pillow like it could stop the chill creeping into my bones. I could still hear her voice from years ago, scolding me across the dinner table. Madison, lower your expectations. You're not like your brother or sister. Just find something safe, something simple. Don't embarrass yourself chasing silly ideas. Except the silly idea she mocked was the very thing that had built my empire. The idea of owning something bigger than myself, building something permanent, unshakable. Hotels had always fascinated me, the way people walk through the doors carrying their entire lives in a suitcase, only to find refuge in a room designed for strangers. To me, hotels were proof that everyone deserved a place to belong, even if it was temporary. Maybe that was why I had poured every sleepless night, every rejection, every ounce of humiliation into my business. If I couldn't find belonging in my family, I'd create it for others. My phone buzzed again. Against my better judgment, I pulled it out and unlocked the screen. It wasn't my mom this time. It was a group photo. My family, smiling in front of the tree. My siblings' partners leaned in, everyone dressed in coordinated red sweaters. Even the dog had a bow. But no seat for me. I zoomed in until their faces blurred into colored pixels, then dropped the phone onto the couch. A hollow laugh slipped past my lips, the kind of laugh that feels more like breaking. Perfect family portrait, I whispered, minus the daughter who wasn't good enough to fit in. The storm outside howled against my windows, rattling the glass. I stood, restless, pacing across the apartment. Every memory came flooding back. The year they forgot to buy me a stocking, the birthday when my father gave Ryan a Rolex while I got a lecture about responsibility, the countless dinners when my voice never carried past the clink of silverware. I had been invisible for so long that I almost believed it myself. Almost. I stopped in front of the mirror hanging in my hallway. My reflection stared back, pale skin flushed from the cold, brown hair tumbling messily around my shoulders, eyes red from holding back tears. But beneath all that, there was something else, something they'd never see. Strength. They thought I was the girl who couldn't survive without their approval. They didn't realize I had built an empire in silence, brick by brick, until the foundation was so solid not even their rejection could shake it. The silence of the apartment grew heavier, almost suffocating. I grabbed my laptop from the desk, flipped it open, and pulled up the live feed from one of my newest hotels in Aspen. Through the camera, I watched guests stream into the lobby, shaking snow from their coats, laughter carrying through the decorated hall. My staff moved seamlessly, offering warm drinks, checking in families, making every guest feel like they belonged. That was mine, my vision, my creation. And in that moment, I realized something important. Maybe I didn't need my family's approval, but I wasn't going to let their rejection define me either. I deserved more than to sit in an empty apartment, watching a storm and pretending I didn't care. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a photo. It was a message from Chloe, "Stay away tonight." Don't ruin this for Mom and Dad. I stared at the words until they blurred, then slowly typed back a reply I knew I'd never send. One day, you'll walk through the doors of a hotel you can't afford, and you'll have no idea your failure of a sister owns it. Instead, I powered off my phone and set it face down on the table. The storm outside roared louder, snow piling higher against the windows. I curled up on the couch, pulling a blanket over my shoulders. The silence wasn't comforting. It was a reminder of every year I had been excluded, every holiday spent on the outside looking in. But deep inside, beneath the ache, something else stirred. Not anger, not bitterness, resolve. If they wanted me gone, fine. If they wanted to pretend I didn't exist, fine. But the world would know me. My hotels would stand taller than their judgments, my success louder than their silence. And someday soon, when they found themselves with no room, no table, no safety net, they'd come looking. They always did. Only this time, they'd be walking into my world, and I would be waiting. The storm passed overnight, leaving the city buried in snowdrifts that sparkled like crushed diamonds under the morning sun. From my window, the streets looked almost peaceful, as if the chaos of the night before had been scrubbed clean. But inside me, nothing was clean. My mother's words, Chloe's message, the family photo, they clung to me like ash after a fire, staining everything they touched. I sat at my desk with a mug of coffee cooling beside me, staring at a blank screen. Normally, mornings meant reviewing reports, answering emails, finalizing contracts. Running a hotel empire wasn't glamorous. It was endless work. But today my mind wasn't on occupancy rates or quarterly earnings. Today, all I could think about was Christmas and how I had been told there was no room for me. The phrase haunted me. No room. Like I was an unwanted guest at my own family's table. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. Maybe they thought they'd won, that by excluding me, they'd put me back in my place. But the truth was, they had no idea what my place really was. And a dangerous part of me wanted to show them. My phone buzzed. This time, it wasn't Chloe or my mother. It was Owen, my head of operations, a man I trusted more than anyone. His message was short, professional, but it landed like fate itself, blizzard-stranded dozens near Evergreen. Aspen property at full capacity. Shall I authorize overflow accommodations? Overflow accommodations. A euphemism for families scrambling, desperate for shelter, no choice but to take whatever we offered. The irony hit me so hard I laughed out loud. My family, safe and smug in their holiday rental, had told me there was no room. Yet here I was, in a position to decide whether strangers, wealthy or broke, powerful or invisible, had room under my roof. I typed back, authorize everything. No one gets turned away. Every guest matters. But as I set my phone down, an idea began to take shape. Something bold. Something reckless. Something they would never see coming. By noon, I had made my decision. I drafted the invitation myself, carefully choosing the words. No logos, no signatures, nothing that hinted at me. Just a simple, elegant card delivered by courier. The Grand Winter Gala requests the honor of your presence. Exclusive celebration. Private guest list. Formal attire. RSVP not required. I sent one to each member of my family, my mother, my father, Chloe, Ryan. I knew the name alone would intrigue them. The Grand Winter Gala was famous in hospitality circles, an invitation-only affair reserved for those with influence. I had created it years ago as a way to honor partners and investors, never once imagining that my estranged family would someday beg for entry. Now, they wouldn't have to beg. They'd walk right in, thinking they were guests, and discover whose house they were really standing in. By evening, the wheels were in motion. My staff, discreet as ever, prepared the ballroom at our Denver property. Crystal chandeliers gleamed overhead, tables draped in silver and navy linens. A towering tree sparkled in the center, ornaments catching the light like stars. Musicians tuned their instruments, Servers rehearsed the flow of champagne. Every detail screamed wealth, power, exclusivity, and it all belonged to me. Owen met me in the hallway just before the first guests arrived. His expression was calm, but his eyes held a flicker of curiosity. "You're certain about this, Madison?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said, smoothing my black gown. "They want to measure me by appearances. Let's give them something to measure." He nodded once. "Then it will be unforgettable." I positioned myself at the top of the grand staircase, hidden from view, as the guests began to file in. Old money, new money, business leaders, politicians. They all entered with wide eyes, admiring the glittering ballroom. My family would blend right in, just another group dazzled by luxury. And then I saw them. My mother, in a sequin dress that tried too hard. My father, stiff in his tuxedo, scanning the room like he owned it. Chloe, glowing as always, clutching her fiancé's arm. Ryan, already laughing too loudly, his ego filling the space before he did. They had no idea. I watched as they accepted champagne flutes from my savers, as they marveled at the tree, as they whispered to one another, clearly impressed. My mother tilted her head toward Chloe, lips curling in satisfaction. She believed she was exactly where she belonged, among the powerful. But power, tonight, was mine. I let them settle in, savoring the anticipation. Then, at the height of the evening, I stepped forward. The orchestra softened, conversations hushed, and all eyes turned to me as I descended the staircase. Gasps rippled through the crowd. They didn't recognize me at first, not in this gown, not with this confidence. But my family did. I saw the shock bloom on their faces, confusion twisting into dread. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying across the room, smooth and steady, "welcome to the Grand Winter Gala. Tonight, we celebrate resilience, unity, and the spirit of belonging. Tonight, every guest in this room is part of my family." The applause thundered, but my eyes never left the four faces frozen near the champagne tower. I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Allow me to officially welcome you to my home." The word struck like lightning. My mother's flute wobbled in her hand. Ryan's laughter died in his throat. Chloe's fiancé muttered something under his breath, clearly connecting dots faster than she could. My father, however, just stared like he was seeing me for the first time. I let the moment stretch, savoring the silence. For once, they couldn't talk over me. For once, I was the one commanding the room. This hotel, this gala, this empire. I gestured around us, my voice growing sharper with each word. Every stone, every chandelier, every smiling face serving tonight. I built it. Me. The daughter you said wasn't good enough. The sister you dismissed. The child you told there was no room for at Christmas. The room erupted again in applause, the crowd mistaking my words for inspiration. But my family knew better. They knew every syllable was meant for them. And judging by their pale faces, the message had landed. The applause faded into background noise, like waves crashing far from shore. All I could hear was the silence of four people who once defined my worth with a shrug. My family stood frozen near the champagne tower, expressions shifting in a kaleidoscope of disbelief, shock, confusion, fear. My mother's sequined hand clutched her glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Ryan's cocky grin had collapsed into a grimace, his bravado leaking out of him like air from a punctured balloon. Chloe's fiancé whispered furiously in her ear, his eyes darting around the ballroom, already calculating how this revelation affected his engagement. And my father stared at me as though he was staring at a ghost. I descended the last step, heels striking marble, each click puncturing the silence. The crowd, oblivious to the storm brewing between us, resumed their chatter, laughter, the orchestra swelling again. But between me and them, time had stopped. "Madison," my mother's voice broke, small and uncertain. It was the first time I'd ever heard her sound unsure of herself. "What is this? What are you doing here?" I tilted my head, letting her question hang. I thought it was obvious, I said, my voice calm, steady, carrying farther than I expected. I own this hotel. I own this gala. Everything you see, every crystal, every light, every room, it's mine. Her jaw slackened, eyes flicking between me and the chandelier glittering above us as if the ceiling itself might deny my words. This must be some kind of performance, Ryan blurted, his voice too loud, his panic polymasked as arrogance. You're just, what? A glorified receptionist who... Careful, Owen interjected smoothly from behind him. My head of operations had appeared at my side, posture crisp, eyes sharp. Miss Madison Carter is not a receptionist. She is the founder and CEO of Meridian Hotels International. With properties across the country and expansion into Europe, she is one of the youngest female executives in the industry. The words struck like a gavel, final and indisputable. The crowd nearest us turned, murmurs rising like wind through trees. My mother's face drained of color. Meridian, she whispered, as if the name itself were poison. That's you. I smiled thinly. Yes, Mother. The same Meridian that sponsored last year's winter charity ball you bragged about attending. The same Meridian whose hotels you've admired in glossy magazines. The same Meridian you've probably told your friends was out of reach for people like me. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. My family stood exposed, stripped of their smug certainty. Impossible, Chloe muttered, shaking her head, her curls bouncing. You barely finished college. You lived in a showbox apartment. You didn't have money. No, I agreed, stepping closer, lowering my voice until only they could hear. I didn't have money, or support, or a family that believed in me. I had nothing except determination. And maybe that was enough. Because while you laughed at me, dismissed me, excluded me from dinners and holidays, I was building something real, something permanent. My father finally spoke, his voice gravelly, heavy. You lied to us. I froze, then laughed, a low, disbelieving sound that turned more than one head. Lied? No, Father. I didn't lie. I simply stopped telling you things you refused to believe. There's a difference. I looked at him directly, years of swallowed anger burning behind my eyes. When I pitched my first idea at the family table, you told me to get my head out of the clouds. When I left for my first internship, you called me irresponsible. When I worked nights, barely eating, barely sleeping, you called me lazy. And when I finally launched my company, you didn't even notice. Because in your world, I was never supposed to matter. His lips parted, but no words came. The orchestra shifted into a softer melody, unaware that in the center of the room, a different symphony was playing, the unraveling of an entire family's illusion. You told me there was no room for me at Christmas. I continued, my voice sharper now, slicing through the air. But here's the truth, there's always been room. You just chose to lock the door. My mother swayed, as though the words had struck her physically. We only wanted. No, I cut her off, the words snapping like a whip. You only wanted control. You wanted me small, manageable, forgettable. But I don't fit into your little box anymore. I never did. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ryan laughed bitterly, though the sound was hollow. So what? You think money makes you better than us? I turned slowly, letting my gaze sweep the ballroom, the glittering lights, the attentive staff who watched me with respect instead of disdain. Then I looked back at him, my brother, who had always believed the world belonged to him. No, Ryan, I said softly. Money didn't make me better, but resilience did. Hard work did. Belief in myself did. The money. I gestured around us. That's just the proof you always demanded before you'd take me seriously. He paled, throat working. Behind him, Chloe's fiancé excused himself, slipping away into the crowd. Her eyes widened as she realized what that meant, that her golden reputation, tied to my downfall, was crumbling in real time. "You humiliated me," I said, lowering my voice again, each word deliberate. "Year after year, you made me feel like an outsider in my own bloodline. Tonight, I wanted you to see the truth. To understand that the person you dismissed as worthless is the same person whose empire you're standing in." The silence between us was absolute, broken only by the faint clink of glasses somewhere across the room. Finally, my father's shoulder sagged. "I was wrong," he admitted hoarsely, the words dragged from him like stones. "So terribly wrong." I studied him, my chest tight. For years, I had dreamed of hearing those words. I thought they would heal me. Instead, they fell flat. Too little. Too late. "Maybe," I said finally, "but wrong doesn't undo the damage. And it doesn't earn you a seat at my table." Their faces, shocked, ashamed, undone, burned into my memory. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the lost daughter. I felt like the woman I had fought to become. The truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same again.